Welcome to Lunch and Learn Mobile Photography. I am Amy Horn, and this recording is in place of the meeting we had on last week. Eric O'Connell is not present at the moment, but he did assist with some of the information in this. So I'm just going to record it for those who missed out. So I have been teaching photography, mobile photography classes for some time through Arizona Highways Photoscapes, and found that sometimes there are some tips and tricks that people are not aware that their phones do. And most of the things that we will cover here today do specifically relate to iPhones, depending on which model you have, but many of the functions are also available on Android phones as well. So might be in a different location, but if you look for those, you'd still be able to find those. So personally, I like to take my phone about anywhere. So the kayaking picture there, that was mine. I have a water bag for it so it stays dry. And then the image on the right, actually one my son took. We have a little challenge now and then on who can capture the best photo using the iPhone. And so a couple more examples. I like to use it when I'm teaching as well. So the image on the left is when I taught a food photography class. The students were shooting with their regular cameras. And I just went ahead and captured one with the iPhone so I could post on social media. Image on the right was another, this is Watson Lake in Prescott, another photo workshop I was teaching for Arizona Highways. And all of my participants had really big fancy cameras, which is what I normally teach, but I just helped them during the workshop. So I was reduced to my iPhone, but it still captured a stunning photo. All right, so we're going to go through several different tips and tricks here, walk you through those different features. And in case you're not aware, cell phones are so adaptable, they can even take slower shutter photos, like the one of the night photo here of the Grand Canyon Cafe, as long as you can keep your camera still. So let's go ahead and start off with one of the most important and fun features is to get exposure compensation, exposure lock, or focus lock. So what this means is sometimes the cameras, they are programmed to see kind of a middle gray in every image, because that's kind of in just about every average image. And if it doesn't see it, it will force that. But you have the right to override that by using the exposure compensation. So when you tap on the screen to get focus, you often get some kind of square. And then in case of the iPhone, where you see the sun over here, it represents the exposure compensation. And if I just take my finger and go up and down, I can make it brighter or darker. So on the next slide, I'll show you how that happens. So I tap to focus and just raise my finger up or down if I wanted, take the picture, and now I have a brighter exposure. So I have that option to do that. The images on the right with the little gnome, those are examples of that, how you can change the exposure depending on what the feel is that you're trying to get. And then when it comes to focus lock, if you look at the image on the left, notice that the glasses are in sharp focus. But generally the focus is in the center of the frame. So once you tap focus, if you hold that tap longer, it will actually lock that focus. So it will keep that distance, that depth in focus at all times, even if you reframe your composition. So let's take a look at how that is done. So here's the tap for focus. You can even use the exposure compensation as well. And then if you click and hold, you get the focus lock. It also does an exposure lock. And then you can go ahead and take that picture. In addition to exposure lock, I find using the burst mode and the timer really helpful. Burst mode, for one, is great if you have anything in action. We have a dog at home, or even my family is pretty adventurous. Many of you probably have grandkids or other pets. And to get that perfect shot with a single shot is not always easy. So if you hold down that shutter button where you're pressing for taking the picture, it will continue to capture images, and you can, in almost nothing flat, you can take about 100 photos. So be careful how long you hold it down, but it will automatically take multiple images, and then you can go back through them and sort them. One really great feature is if you use the timer, at least on the iPhone, once you set that timer, like a 10-second timer, it will take 10 images automatically. So I like to use the timer even for selfies, because then depending on the reaction or the expression, you'll have multiple images to pick from. If you're taking group shots of people, that's always nice too. Use the timer, because then you have multiple choices to choose from. So on the iPhone, if I have a burst, I've captured 20 photos here of our dog playing Frisbee, and I want to go sort back through them. Once it says burst, I just go ahead and hit the select button down below, and then it will pull up all of these different images. And then I can tap the circle in the bottom right-hand corner to select images to keep or deselect, and decide which ones are better, which ones are going to work. When I'm done and I hit done, then the phone asks me, do you want to keep everything or just that one favorite? So you can instantly get rid of all those excess photos that you don't want. And then when it comes to burst is also helpful. Like I said, you can take a selfie. These are actually my son doing some high altitude training and runs, and he will set up his phone on a timer, and that way it instantly takes 10 images, so he can go back through the photos and find the ones with the best positioning of him, as well as him in the frame and the best photo. That way you don't have pictures with your eyes closed or something like that too. So really handy using the self timer and burst. Okay, quick take. This is a feature in the newer iPhones. So on the XS, XR, and later. So the 10, it's not in. But if you were to open the camera and then decide you wanted to take video, if you press and hold the shutter button, you can start video. And if you slide it to the right, it actually locks the video in. So let's take a look at how that feature works here. So open the camera, press and hold, and then if you slide it over to the right like that, it will start the video, and then you can walk around fairly hands-free. You're not having to hold that video button, and then you swipe it over to the left to stop it. Now, if you're curious how we've done some of these screen recordings of the iPhone, I use this feature quite often because I teach photography, and many of the apps that I use on my phone help my high-end camera photography as well. And so I like to show students that. So I actually create screen recordings of these different apps. And that's what you've been seeing in several of these other slides. So on the iPhones, in your control center, you'll see this icon if you activate it. And that is the screen recording icon. And so the instructions here just tell you how to do it. If you go to the control center, under your settings, your general settings, and then scroll down until you see screen recording, and you hit the plus sign to add that to your control center. Then when you pull down your control center, like you see here, you're now going to see this icon. To activate the screen recording, it's a simple tap, and then the button counts down 3, 2, 1, and at 1 it starts recording. Once it's recording, you'll notice at the top left-hand corner of your screen that the time of day turns bright red, and that shows that it's recording. So when you're finished doing the activity on your phone that you're trying to record, all you do is tap that up at the top and it will stop the screen recording. And then it ends up showing up in your regular photo roll as a video. A couple other things that I find really helpful with my photography, if I'm using the iPhone, first off would be a set of headphones, the headphones that come with it in particular. Because when you take pictures with an iPhone, you can use the volume buttons on the phone. So if you wanted to actually hold the phone horizontally, tapping the screen might not be the most comfortable. But if you position your volume phones on your camera under your forefinger, then you can just capture an image that way. Well, in addition, if you use your headphones plugged into your camera, you can use the volume buttons on the headphones. So this allows for, it's wired, but it's you don't have to touch the camera. If I were to take a slower shutter speed photo, like the one that we saw at the beginning of the presentation, a night photo, if I'm tapping the screen, there's a good chance I might bump the camera as I take the image. Therefore, it won't be a sharp image. So if I'm doing night photography or moving water, slow shutter photography with my iPhone, I will often use a little miniature tripod like this. And then I have a mount which helps hold the iPhone. And then I can use the wired headphones and tap the volume button to activate the shutter. So I'm not tapping the screen, I'm not creating any camera movement. So if you like to take a lot of photos, if you're on vacation, these things are pretty simple and easy to carry around. They don't take up that much space in a bag if you use your phone a lot for photography. Now, one thing iPhones are not good at is getting information off of them. And that's one critique, that it's hard to get things off. So SanDisk has made what's called the iExpand drive. And it has a lightning port on one end and a USB on the other. So again, it's called SanDisk iExpand drive, and they're really handy to transfer information back and forth. And once you buy the hardware, the app itself is free. And I have found that very helpful to get files or images or movies or music, whatever it is I want, off the phone and onto a computer. So here's an example of using those headphones, and I didn't use the tripod. I actually held the phone next to a column. This is in New York City, the subway, but I used the headphones so I didn't have to tap the screen. So this is a 1/4 of a second shutter speed, and that's why you see the movement of the subway, but she is quite still. A couple more examples of using slow shutter speed. So fireworks, the image on the left, that's a 1-second photo. The center image is actually paint chips. So like from Home Depot, paint sample chips. And I just move the phone over the top to create an abstract. And then the third image, another 1/4 second photo of a spinning top. And these were all captured using tripods. Well, not the center one. The outside ones were used using tripods, but all of them used the headphones and the volume button on the headphone for the shutter. All right, a couple other things that have been newer features in all these newer phones today is they have multiple lenses. And so with the multiple lenses, they can take really great portraits because they have multiple focal lengths. So if you have a zoom, and it says in my case it's a 1x or 2x because I have two different lenses, those are higher quality than if I were to just zoom and do a digital zoom. So in the case of portraits, you can really utilize some great features. The portrait mode on these phones will automatically use the two lenses in conjunction. So this center picture is the first image that was captured on location. And notice the background is pretty visible. It's not very soft. And so this is the traditional zoom or non-zoom traditional lens of the camera taking a portrait. And then without moving my feet, all I did was change the phone and put it into portrait mode. And by putting it into portrait mode, the iPhone, or I know Google phones do this as well, they will instantly utilize both lenses. And by doing that, it changes the focal length. And by changing the focal length, you get a little more compression in the background. You also get a shallower depth of field. So look how out of focus this background is. And then of course, it brings my subject up tighter. So I didn't move my feet for either of these images. I stayed in the same spot. It's just a matter of changing the lenses. And then here's another example over here on the right of using portrait mode, and look how nice and creamy soft that background is. And then several of the phones have mono lighting or black and white type modes too. So this is a combination of using the portrait mode with the mono lighting. And you can see how simply it just eliminated the background on the picture on the right. All right, editing photos. We've all probably had our share at doing some edits, and there's many, many great apps out there. But one of the first things I think if you haven't spent some time on all the little bells and whistles within your own phone's editing default program, there are some great options there that you might not have realized. First thing, there's a feature that I like to recommend to everyone, and that is to mark an image as a favorite. I think we've all been standing in front of a group and someone says, oh, let me show you this picture. And they swipe, 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 and it takes a while to find it. So if you decide that there's an image you're probably going to be showing people, you can mark it as a favorite. And then that goes into a separate album. Doesn't move it, it just kind of makes a virtual copy of it. And then you have the option of just pulling up that favorites folder to show people these recent current photos you want to tell them about. When it comes to the actual editing, most all these applications that are built in have an auto adjust, which I find to be pretty helpful in a lot of cases. But there are also some much more advanced features if you wanted to add color filters, or if you wanted to adjust exposure, whether it's the shadows and the highlights or your whites or blacks. You can get into and do some pretty fine tuning adjustments. Some of these apps will even allow you to open additional applications. And this is just from the default Apple application. So here's an example of some in-camera editing, and this was just using the auto feature. Now, when it comes to apps, there are some fun ones, and I find Roll World to be a pretty fun one. It creates wormholes of traditional images. You can either capture an image and create the wormhole. You can also use the camera and do it live, or find an image that you've captured previously and then process it that way too. The Glaze or the photo filter app, this one allows you to add, Glaze is an older app. Photo filter is a more current app, but it allows you to turn images into watercolors or paintings. Some even do sketching. So there's all kinds of great filtering apps that way if you want to turn your work into art. There is even LD or lens distortion, even adds little sunbursts. So the image on the right is the added one. This was the original one. This image was actually captured on a camera, and then I brought it onto the phone to add a little bit more of a sunburst. And then if you really want to have fun, the different Adobe apps, whether it's Photoshop or Adobe Mix, you can actually create composites if you want. You can tell the finished product on the far right around my head is not ideal. It's not a great cutout, but if it's on a small phone, it might pass if that's what you want. This image was not something I planned to do permanently. It was just more a matter of what is this phone capable of? And believe it or not, it did actually confuse a few people. They actually thought this was a real scenario, that I had just captured a picture of me while the whale was breaching in the background. All right, one app that I really, really enjoy is Ink. And this app creates postcards. And the initial image on the left here, you have different categories and you can add your own photos, or you can use a grid app and create a grid of your own photos like you see here and over here. But once you create it all in the app, you have the opportunity to write in it. You put in an address, and for $2, this app will send a glossy 5x7 postcard to your people using your images or using some of their default designs, but you can still add your image to it as well. So it's a great opportunity. When we travel, we like to create different postcards to thank, whether it's grandparents or parents that we've gone to visit. And as we drive away, I can be creating a postcard to have shipped to them, thanking them for the visit, and they get customized photos with their grandkids or with us or whomever it might be. And the last app is Seek. This app is great if you walk around a lot in nature and always wonder what certain flowers are or possibly wildlife. You take a picture of it and it will, so this, you see the center image, that's just taking a picture of it. And then you click on identify photo. And then on the right, the program comes up saying, hey, this is what you found. If it doesn't know, it'll say maybe you need to get a better picture of it or something, but large majority of the time it's pretty accurate. So a lot of fun, all kinds of different apps that you can use, and all kinds of things you can do with your mobile photography. So the images on this last screen are other examples of, again, some more watering with paddleboarding. This was another picture my son took. He was on an airplane when Elon Musk did the launch, so he was able to capture that through the airplane window. And I like to use other little lenses and do other creative things as well. And with my photography and teaching photography, I will also take pictures of my scene where I'm at to share that with students. So I hope you found this helpful and hope you can find some use for some of these new tips and tricks.